these big celebrations, like what do they mean to us?
When it was International Women's Day last week, I was reflecting on the young women that work in our company, and who they are and what they bring. So I think that the celebration month or the celebration day, I don't. I think it's only meaningful if you actually reflect on its application in your own life and in your own experience.
Let's talk about creating a life and country we're proud of together. I'm your host, Alvina Vasquez. Welcome to Alvina Talks Shift. This is part 2 of an amazing interview we had with Susan last week. But we connected after the episode, and I don't think we got to everything we needed to. And Susan has some questions for me too. So we'll kick it off, Susan. Welcome back.
I do. Thank you. So excited to be working with you every day and doing this once a week now, at least for a couple weeks. I do have some questions for you. So we talked a little bit about what it was like for me, sort of coming up in the working world, and working for Pat Schroeder, as you mentioned, and kind of what the issues were that we were focusing on at the time. But I wanted to hear from you, like what's it been like for you coming up as a woman in business, as a Latina in business, and what kinds of barriers or obstacles did you encounter?
Yeah, what's interesting is I started in broadcasting, which very male dominated. I mean, that's why that whole what we talked about with like the work harassment and like hostile work environments was so like ingrained in me, because that's what the broadcasting world was like. I mean, it was male dominated, very machoism. Pretty much they could say whatever, people could say whatever they wanted to you. I mean, I had men telling me they were having dreams about me, like very gross stuff that I mean, you just kind of deal with it and move on. There wasn't like an HR department you could go to, because I mean, even though they're broadcasting, they're very small stations. So it's like, salespeople, sales manager, that's pretty much it. There's no HR, there's no like organization that you can complain to. So it was really interesting. And it kind of, uh, the way that I feel like women now have so much more voice than they used to. It's not always the same, but that's why sometimes when people, especially young people, complain about certain things, it takes me back, because I'm like, oh my God, I had to deal with such terrible stuff. And that's like nothing compared. And it doesn't mean that it's not valuable, the experiences that young people are having in the workspace, but just a note to them that it's so much better than it used to be. I mean, it was like so uncomfortable. We had to wear, you kind of had to cover up because you didn't want to be harassed at work. And it was just a really interesting. But then when I moved into like the advocacy world, very women dominated. I worked with women almost exclusively, except for a few men, like within labor, obviously still at the time, still a lot of men were working in labor. So it was super interesting to make that switch. But then, with just like with any leader, you have good ones or bad ones. Doesn't matter which gender they are or how they identify. But I think it's given me resiliency. It's given me the opportunity to decide, like, what are the things that are worth fighting for? What are the things I'm going to pick at? And what are the things that I just need to let it go and move on, and set those expectations for myself. But I would say, like, now so I was an owner of my company before I became an owner of SE2. And I've noticed over the past couple months since I've been at SE2, and I was thinking about this weekend, because as you know, last week I was really sick and I was really tired, and I was like, okay, I think I need to like take some time off. And it was because it's not like an imposter syndrome, but it's like, this is what I think an owner of a company should be like and act like. And so I'm not living up to that in my mind. And I feel like that was kind of setting me back. So I needed like the weekend to reset, even though I was still like responding to emails and doing stuff. What I was doing is just like mentally cleansing and like getting myself to a place where like I need to be confident what I'm doing doesn't matter what, what the day brings. Like that stuff was piling on. And so I was like, ugh, I just need a breath. I just need a breath of fresh air. So I think it's just, it's just like every environment gives us new challenges, and we have to know when is the time to take a break and just reset so that we can like refocus on what needs to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, you are just fine the way you're acting as an owner of a business. So you don't need to worry about that. There's no imposter in in how you're perceived whatsoever. So, so that gives me some insight into a shared experience that you and I had in terms of coming up as a woman in business. I worked in a place where the owner would openly grope one of my coworkers, and a manager at the same place up close to me said, "You have a very kissable mouth." I just things like that you hopefully women never encounter in this day and age. But so it sounds like we had that somewhat in common. What's really different is that I was a white woman coming up in business, and you're a Latina. What what can you reflect on that experience and how that might have been different?
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about this before, I get pigeonholed a lot into like, I'm only good at Latino stuff. I'm only good at Latino outreach. That's why working with the governor's campaign as the political director for all constituencies was so important to me, because it got me out of a box. It got me in other rooms. It got me talking to different people, as opposed to Alvina does Latino outreach. And also, I'm a third generation Latino. I'm not from an immigrant family. So being pigeonholed to like be aware or know exactly the experiences of an immigrant family, it's it's not relatable to me. So it's also putting me in a place where I don't necessarily I might not be the right person, or I might not have the right experience. Obviously I know how to like engage in those audiences and those constituencies, and I've learned over time how to like relate to them and understand and be open to listening to their experiences. But just to show, like, just because I'm Latina doesn't mean I know the immigrant experience. My dad went to college. He was the first to go to college. So what is that means he didn't know how to fill out a FAFSA, but he knew how to engage like into planning for college. So it's like it's I don't know if we're given the grace to have multiple like life experiences and have multiple generations. We're kind of like put in a box like, oh, Latino, immigrant, Spanish speaking. And then there's all this whether you speak Spanish well enough, whether you get enough credit for speaking Spanish. When I went through the Latina Leadership Institute, they talked about language justice in a different way. So when my parents moved here, they were told never speak Spanish at home because my brother was stuttering. What he was doing is he was translating, and they said never speak Spanish. So it was out of racism, we lost our language, and I had to relearn it. But
Hmm.
new immigrants come here and they're like, oh, they don't know how to speak Spanish. So you get judged on that. And so it kind of puts you in a weird place where you're this like, I identify with like white community, middle class family, that stuff. But I also understand that like the impacts of all this racism from the past that has impacted me and my future and my kids as well.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of kids, how is Romero?
Oh my God, he's so much fun. We went to, he's so, what's interesting about a toddler is it's kind of like you see their brain expand every day. Like every day it's a new
Mhm.
word, or you see him make sense of something that didn't make sense yesterday. And it's pretty amazing to see that experience.
Yeah, yeah. You're going through a period right now that's also similar to what I went through. My kids are in their mid 20s now, but being a working mom, uh, trying to, work and in your case, own a business, be out in the community and have a toddler, that's a heavy load. How do you balance all that?
I mean, you don't. I mean, you're good at some things one days, and other days you're good at something else.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about when I came to the office before, when we were talking about negotiating and the ownership process, and I had to bring the baby with me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't a test. I was on my way to the airport, so it's like I didn't have anywhere to take him, so he had to come with me. But that moment stood out to you. So I know you said something in that meeting. So describe what you were thinking when you made that comment and what you said.
What did I say? I hope it was good.
No, it
I
was good.
hope
You
it
were
was.
like,
I hope it wasn't. Why'd you bring your kid?
it wasn't, why did you bring your kid?
What was it? I don't know.
No, I think it was something like, how amazing is it that you're a business owner selling your business and your toddler's like here with you to
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. 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 That. Oh my goodness. When I think about when my kids were little, and I was already during the years that I worked for Schroeder, I just had one uh, toddler, a baby, then toddler. But by the time I, left that and ended up working at a couple of different jobs in Denver, worked at National Jewish, worked running the statewide tobacco control coalition. So all this predates SE2. Um, I can remember being uh, trying to coach my kids soccer, and I'm in the field coaching little kids, little girls, um, and getting calls about bills that clients were working on at the Capitol, and I had to do both. I knew I had to have that moment where I was, being a good mom by taking the turn at coaching soccer, but I also had to keep these other plates spinning. I mean, I took kids babies in backpacks to press conferences that I was organizing and setting up for dinners. When we're celebrating someone, and I'm setting up tables with a baby in a backpack. Um, so, he is welcome anytime that you need to, combine those two roles of yours. Because I get it. Been there, done that.
It's so exciting because like that's the legacy he'll have now,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Oh my God, I'm getting emotional. That's a legacy he's gonna have because you all invested in me and I invested in that business. So I think that's really exciting. And it's really like, he's adopted. So who knows what the outcomes could have been of his life? It could have been anything. And so thank you for your support. That's amazing.
Yeah. Something tells me that his outcomes are going to be good
Yeah.
with you as a mom, as a working mom.
So he's a good networker. He's always shaking hands. He knows how to work a room already.
Yeah, I took my kids to, at the beginning it was take your daughter to work day, and I took my son anyway because he was older, and now it's take your child to work day, I think. But I took him down to the Capitol, and he met Governor Lamb, and Governor Lamb, who was a very tall, imposing figure, looked down at him and said, "Young man, it's nice to meet you. What's your favorite book you're reading right now?" Which I thought was such a great question for a little, school age kid to have to answer, and he did. So yeah, those experiences, I think, of combining parenting with
Yeah.
working, I think they only add to who you are and how effective you are. It's tough. I'm not gonna lie, it's tough to keep all the plates spinning, but ultimately it's a good mix.
And then like forgiving yourself when you're like, well, I didn't do good at that, but got to move on. That goes back to that like initial resiliency that I think I got from working with people that were not the best work environments, I guess.
Yeah. Have you ever been really overwhelmed
Yeah,
in work, whether it was once you had a kid?
I get overwhelmed okay, so my dad gave me really good advice. He was like, once you read an email, the clock starts ticking in your head to respond to that email. So he's like, so when you're gone, you have to turn your email off because if your phone is dinging, that's the clock ticking like constantly. So I get overwhelmed. And as you know, because I brought this up at work a few times, I get overwhelmed when I feel like there's all these people that need things. And I don't even have the mind space to like think about what they need also take care of what
Mhm.
a client needs and understand what's happening in a project and moving that forward. I really appreciate um, anticipating the needs of the people that I'm serving. So if I don't have time to think about anticipating the needs or the next steps, that's when I get overwhelmed and frustrated when I'm like, oh my God,
Mhm.
I can't even read this email and understand what it means for next steps. That's when I get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
I don't have that time to anticipate the needs of what the next steps are.
We talk about channel overload
Oh
just
my,
between, the
oh my gosh, Teams, Slack, texting. Oh, it's too much.
yeah, it is too much. I think it's exacerbating our short attention span evolution that we're all experiencing because we're constantly having to go from this to this to this to this, and and you feel like you're just not keeping up. At least I do.
That's how I feel. And then, and then you feel like you're not keeping up with the kid either because you're like on your phone, like trying to think through things. So
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that, like turning off my email, just getting work done, and then going back to email later. I have to get a better routine with that.
I took one. I a couple of years ago. I took 1 month off. Actually, it turned into 5 weeks, but uh, I took 1 month off, and the greatest gift was from Eric and Brandon, our partners, who were so supportive of me doing that and insisted that I remove the apps from my phone. So I took Outlook off, I took Teams off, everything came off my phone. Um, and it was, I hadn't taken more than 2 weeks off in 20 years
Yeah.
at any time. And so I definitely think it's good to have that space where we can just breathe and reflect and then come back, refreshed and focused.
I need to be better about that because I get like FOMO. Like I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm stressed out when
I
the
know.
reentry is also stressful for me too. Like anticipating the reentry is like, oh, I'm gonna have all this stuff. So what I, look forward to being with the SE2 team is like there's a whole bunch of hands in the, in the mix. They can get things done so that the reentry is like smooth and like all you need to do is like this, and this, and then you're all caught up. And it's not as
Yeah.
um jarring as like when you're
Yeah.
a sole proprietor and it's like, well, nothing happened while I was gone, so now I have to pay the
Right.
price.
Right. Right. Well, speaking of the SE2 team, just what do you think that is the greatest thing that you can bring to them as we are now headed, we're where we are well into 2024 at this point, but what do you think, your your lessons that you're trying to bring to our team as you integrate as a new owner?
I think the work that SE2 has done for like change behavior and working on a lot of these, taxpayer state programs, knowing the front end of that, the advocacy, like how hard people are working to get the money so those programs can exist and help people. I think that's the one thing. And I know that SE2 did previously work on that side of
Mhm.
of the issues. So I'm really excited to get because the team at SE2 is so young and dynamic and diverse. I feel like they're the best team to start learning this stuff because I feel like it really like from what I can tell, it seems like to really energize them, it's almost like opening a whole new can of worms for them of how do they engage in their own community? How do they like the money that they're getting paid to do this work is coming from taxpayers, like taxpayers. And so, how are they being stewards of that work, making sure that the advocates that fought so hard to get these things done, to make sure that it's put in the best possible light and the best possible work that we can put out there. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I love that. And as you said, that's where our roots were at SE2 was working, a lot on policy advocacy, policy communications, and have gotten more into um, advertising and constructing these big campaigns. But you're absolutely right. Getting back to kind of that ground level and having them see and experience that progress is slow, and it's hard work. It's incremental, and you just gotta keep plugging away at it.
I know for especially for the younger generation, incremental is so hard to take.
Yeah.
Like, you want changes, hard, fast changes, but that's just not how the system works, unfortunately.
No,
But the incremental
no.
things that get done are so worth celebrating. Like, because even
Yeah.
like me and you are a generation away from like sexual harassment on a daily basis at work. Um,
Mhm.
my dad,
Mhm.
the year he turned 18 was the year it became legal for people of color to vote. Like, we're not that far
Mm,
away from
mhm.
the worst that our country has been in the past.
Yeah. 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 Well, and our job is to keep moving forward.
Moving forward, that's right. So, what do you think? Okay, so now I'm on the SE2 team. What do you think is the future of the work of SE2 and kind of what we've talked about in developing these community relationships?
Yeah, boy, it doing this kind of work has really changed because I think the way that agencies like ours used to work with communities is that we would come to them pretty late in the process and say, "Hey, we've developed this campaign. Can you push this out in your community? Can you take our work and share it with your community, whether that's a rural community, whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's people of color." And that has really shifted. And we saw that change coming um, several years ago, um, and just adapting to that has been challenging, and that's partly where you come in, is to help us stay focused on um, involving communities earlier in the process. We're now making sure that we're doing research directly with them. We're testing messages and creative directly with them. We are getting their input in on a strategic level and on a creative level into the campaigns that we're creating. We can't just go to them with an ask. It has to be a mutually beneficial dynamic. So that, I think, that is the challenge ahead, is for us to continue that evolution, and make sure that we're working with community-based organizations early and often, and in a really authentic way, not in a not to check a box, but to really make sure um, that we're trans creating campaigns effectively, that we're really hearing their voices and incorporating their perspective and their stories into the work that we're doing.
So we're gonna wrap up here in a minute, but this is Women's History Month, and I made a comment on my Facebook that everybody loved because I was like, "I'm celebrating me. I have this whole support network of people, but actually, I'm the one who made changes. I'm the one who made chances, and I'm the one who got these things done." So when people like do these big like Women's Day, blah blah blah, how do you feel? Like, what do you think about that? Is it good? Is it worth it?
What worth it? What do you mean?
Like these big celebrations, like what do they mean to us? Like,
Yeah, it's funny because when it was International Women's Day last week, I was reflecting on the young women that work in our company, and who they are and what they bring. And I need to tell each one of them that directly, um, because I was thinking about it. So I think that, the celebration month or the celebration day, I don't, I think it's only meaningful if you actually reflect on its application in your own life and in your own experience. Um, so I don't know that those days really achieve anything, honestly, if you don't take a minute to think about it. And that saying of you know think globally, act locally. I think it's the same thing. recognize the sort of global celebration going on, but ultimately think about how do I give meaning to that in my own experience and in my own circle of influence.
I mean, that's totally how I felt. I was like, sometimes as women, we're so easy to like give credit to somebody else. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for getting me through this. And I don't think, I mean, I love that like community spirit, but also like we get to take credit for what we've done, for what we've experienced and what we've overcome. And I don't know if we do that enough.
No, I don't. And there are many among us who continue to really, really struggle. I mean, if you're a trans woman, that struggle is real. I mean, many of the things that you and I experienced earlier on in our careers are amplified tenfold for what trans women are living with today. So you know, it's not like it's smooth sailing from here forward. I think you know, we're duty bound to make sure that we're supporting women, people who identify as women, people who are non-binary. Um, we have to continue to support them today because the struggle is continues for them.
Well, thank you, Susan, for another amazing episode of Alvina Talks Shift. We're going to have lots of conversations. I love our chats. I know we're the two women partners, but every time I walk away with a conversation with you, I learn something, and I just feel I feel safe, and I feel like you got my back. So, thank you for that, Susan, and thank you for joining me on this episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching Alvina Talks Shift. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, engage, empower, evolve. If you liked this episode, or if you want more content like this, go to alvinatalkshift.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.